My name is Claire, and I'm 31 years old. 3 days ago, I was discharged from a hospital 4 hours from home after emergency surgery to remove a ruptured ovarian cyst the size of a golf ball. I had gone in alone, been operated on alone, and woken up in a recovery room alone. And when I finally had enough strength to pick up my phone, the first thing I did was open the family group chat. I typed, "Surgery went okay. Being discharged Friday at 2 p.m. Can someone come get me? It's about a 4-hour drive." My brother replied in 11 minutes. 11 minutes I remember because I was staring at the screen, counting. He wrote, "We've got Tyler's soccer tournament this weekend. You know how long we've been planning this. Can't you just get a rideshare or something?" My mother's message came 4 minutes after that. "Sweetheart, you really should have given us more notice. This is very last minute." I stared at both messages for a long time. Then I typed back, "No worries, you're right. I'll figure it out." And I put my phone face down on the hospital bed and looked at the ceiling until the tears stopped coming. I need you to understand something about my family before I tell you the rest of this story, because if I don't, you'll spend the whole time thinking I must be exaggerating, or that there must be something I'm leaving out, some context that would make their behavior make sense. There isn't. But I want to be fair, so I'll start at the beginning. I grew up in a house in Dayton, Ohio, the middle child of 3. My brother, Daniel, is 4 years older than me. My sister, Paige, is 3 years younger. My mother ran the household and my father worked long hours at a manufacturing plant until he retired early with a bad back. We weren't close in the way some families are close. We didn't have inside jokes or Sunday dinners or the kind of easy warmth you see in holiday commercials. But I never thought we were broken, either. I thought we were just practical, Midwestern, reserved. I was the first one to leave. At 22, I took a job in Nashville, Tennessee, doing graphic design for a mid-sized marketing agency. I liked the city. I liked the anonymity of it, the way no one knew my history. I built a life there slowly, an apartment I was proud of, a small circle of friends, a routine that felt genuinely mine. I called home every Sunday. Sometimes the calls lasted 4 minutes. Sometimes they lasted 20. My mother would give me updates on Daniel's kids, on Paige's new boyfriend, on my father's back. I would tell her about work. We would say "love you" at the end, and mean it, I think. Or at least not mean it. For 9 years, this was the shape of my relationship with my family. Functional, distant, adequate. Then, in January of this year, I started having pain. It came and went at first. A dull ache on my lower right side that I told myself was stress or bad posture or something I'd eaten. I was busy at work, we'd just landed a big client, and I was leading the account. I kept meaning to make a doctor's appointment and kept not making it. This is, I know, a very stupid thing to do. I am aware of that now in a way I was not fully aware of then. By March, the pain was no longer dull. It woke me up at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, sharp and spreading, and I drove myself to the emergency room with one hand on the wheel and the other pressed against my side. The ER doctor ordered an ultrasound. The ultrasound found a cyst on my right ovary large, they said, and showing signs that it might be twisting. They admitted me immediately. I called my mother from a hospital bed at 4 in the morning while they were prepping me for potential emergency surgery. Her phone rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I left a message. I texted. I tried my father. Nothing. I called Paige. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice thick with sleep. I told her where I was and what was happening. She said, "Oh my God, Claire. Okay, keep me posted." I said, "Paige, I might be going into surgery in a few hours." She said, I know. Just let me know how it goes, okay? I have work in the morning." I said, "Okay." I hung up. I did not call Daniel. The surgery happened at 6:15 that morning. The cyst had partially ruptured and they removed it laparoscopically. I woke up at 9 with a nurse squeezing my hand and asking me what my pain level was on a scale of 1 to 10. I said 4. It was more like a 7. But I have always been bad at asking for help. My mother called back at 11. She said she hadn't heard her phone, and then, before I could finish explaining what had happened, she said, "Well, thank goodness it was laparoscopic. That's so much easier than the alternative." She said it the way you'd say, "Thank goodness the flight was only delayed an hour." Like the problem was already behind us and we could all move on. I was discharged 2 days later, on a Friday. The hospital was in Knoxville. I had been on a work trip when the pain became unbearable and went to the nearest ER. 4 hours from my apartment in Nashville. 4 hours from anyone I knew. And that is when I sent the text. The rideshare I booked cost $212. The driver? A man named Gerald who was probably 65 and had a pine tree air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror, helped me carry my overnight bag to the car without being asked. He took one look at me pale, moving slowly, hospital discharge papers folded in my coat pocket, and turned the radio down without saying anything. We drove for 40 minutes in comfortable silence before he said, "You doing okay back there?" I said, "I've been better." He nodded like that was a complete answer. "You got someone at home?" I hesitated a moment too long. "I'll be fine," I said. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. That's not what I asked. I don't know why that made me cry. Maybe because it had been 3 days since anyone had asked me a question that wasn't about my insurance information or my pain level. Maybe because it was so simple and so direct and no one in my family had thought to ask it. I turned toward the window and cried quietly for about 10 minutes while Gerald pretended not to notice, which was one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me. When we pulled up to my apartment building, he put the car in park and turned around. He said, "I've got a daughter about your age. I'd want to know if she was going through something like this alone." He paused. "I hope whoever should have come for you figures out what they missed." I thanked him. I meant it more than I've meant most things. My apartment was cold. I had turned the heat down before leaving for the work trip to save money, and I hadn't thought to turn it back up remotely. I stood in the entryway for a moment, bag at my feet, and took stock of what I had. Half a box of pasta, some canned soup, a freezer with 2 lean cuisines and an ice tray. No one had stocked my fridge. No one had turned on a lamp so I wouldn't come home to a dark apartment. No one had left a note. These sound like small things. I want to be honest about that. They are small things. But when you have just had surgery and driven 4 hours alone and cried in a stranger's car, small things land differently. I changed into sweatpants and heated up a can of tomato soup and sat on my couch and tried to figure out how I felt. I was angry, I think, but the anger was far away, like a sound coming from another room. What was closer was something more like grief, not for a person, but for a version of my family I had apparently been imagining for years without realizing it. A version where someone would come. I checked the group chat. Daniel had sent a photo of Tyler celebrating after his team won the tournament. My mother had sent 3 heart emojis in response. Paige had sent a gif of someone cheering. No one had asked how the discharge went. No one had said, "Claire, are you home? Are you okay?" I put my phone down and finished my soup. The next morning, I woke up stiff and sore and unable to reach the bottle of ibuprofen I'd put on a shelf too high. I stood in my kitchen in the thin, early light, arms stretched up, wincing, and I thought, this is the moment I could call someone and ask for help. I had a friend named Rosie who lived 12 minutes away. We'd worked together 2 years ago and stayed close. She was the kind of person who showed up, who remembered your coffee order and your mother's name and the thing you'd mentioned worrying about 3 months ago. I had not called her because I had not wanted to be a burden. I had not called her because I had been so certain, right up until I wasn't, that my family would come. I called her. She was at my apartment in 20 minutes with a bag of groceries, a heating pad, and a mango smoothie from the place down the street, because she remembered I'd mentioned it once in passing. She didn't make a big deal of any of it. She put the groceries away while I sat at the kitchen table, and when she was done, she sat across from me and said, "Tell me what happened." So I told her, all of it. The surgery, the phone call to my mother at 4 in the morning, Paige's "let me know how it goes," the group chat text, my brother's 11-minute response, the rideshare Gerald, the cold apartment. When I finished, Rosie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Claire, I need you to hear me say this clearly. That is not okay. What they did is not okay. I had known this, somewhere. But there is a difference between knowing something and having someone say it to you plainly, without hedging, without immediately following it up with, but I'm sure they didn't mean it that way or family is complicated. She just said it. and I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was wound so tight. She stayed most of the day. We watched a movie and she helped me shower and she made pasta for lunch. The good kind with a real sauce from a jar rather than the sad, dry box kind. Before she left, she said, "You don't have to minimize this. You're allowed to be hurt." I thought about that for a long time after she left. A week passed. I heard from my mother once. She sent a link to an article about post-surgery recovery tips and a message that said, "Saw this and thought of you. Rest up." I heard from Paige once, a voice memo that lasted 40 seconds and was mostly about a fight she'd had with her boyfriend. I heard from Daniel, not at all. I went back to work from home 10 days after surgery, still moving carefully, still sore. My colleagues had sent a card signed by everyone on the team. My manager had quietly shifted a deadline so I wouldn't fall behind. These were people I saw 40 hours a week. These were people who had shown up not perfectly, not dramatically, but consistently, and without being asked twice. I kept thinking about something Rosie had said the day she came over. She said, "Who are the people who actually appear in your life? Because those are your people." I was starting to understand that the answer to that question was not the answer I would have given a month ago. 3 weeks after my discharge, my mother called on a Sunday, which was normal, and after we'd gone through the usual updates, Daniel's kids, Paige's boyfriend, my father's physical therapy, she said, "I do hope you're not still upset about the surgery weekend. We really couldn't have known it would be so serious." I sat with that sentence for a moment. Couldn't have known it would be so serious. I had told Paige I might be going into emergency surgery. I had left a voicemail for my mother from a hospital at 4 in the morning. I had sent a text to the group chat asking for someone to drive 4 hours to bring me home after an operation. I said, "Mom, I called you at 4 in the morning before surgery." She said, "I know," and I felt terrible about missing that call. "But you know I'm a deep sleeper, Claire." I said, "I left a voicemail." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I just think we could all move forward without anyone feeling like they need to keep score." There it was. I had heard versions of this sentence my whole life. The suggestion that acknowledging hurt was the same as being petty, that naming what happened was the same as nursing a grudge, that the emotionally mature thing to do was to release it quietly and never bring it up again. For most of my life, I had done exactly that. I had released things quietly. I had never brought them up again. And I had told myself this was grace or perspective or just the practical reality of imperfect families. I understood on that phone call that it was none of those things. It was just silence. And silence had started to feel like agreement. I said, "Mom, I'm not keeping score. I'm telling you that I was scared and alone and I needed someone to come." And no one came. And when I reached out, the response I got made me feel like an inconvenience. That hurt. I needed you to know that it hurt. The silence on the other end was different from her usual silences. Longer, more careful. She said, "Finally, I hear you." Just that. Not "I'm sorry," not "you're right," just "I hear you." I said, "Thank you," and then I let the conversation end. I didn't cut my family off. I want to be clear about that, because I know that's the expected ending to a story like this, the dramatic severance, the satisfying finality of blocking numbers and returning to sender. Real life is messier than that. What I did was quieter, and I think in the long run more honest. I stopped performing. I stopped being the version of myself I had always brought to family conversations, cheerful, minimizing, quickly reassuring, turning serious things into small things so no one would feel uncomfortable. I stopped volunteering information about my life that I didn't actually want their input on. I stopped filling silences that didn't need to be filled. I called less often. When I did call, I kept the conversations shorter. Not coldly, I wasn't punishing anyone. I was just being accurate. I was letting the relationship be the size it actually was, instead of the size I had always hoped it might become. It was uncomfortable at first. My mother noticed and asked if something was wrong. I said, "I'm okay. I'm just figuring some things out." Paige texted once to say she felt like I was being distant. I replied that I had a lot going on and would catch up soon. Daniel, predictably, didn't notice anything at all. What I put the energy into instead was the life that was actually in front of me. I had dinner with Rosie twice a week. I joined a pottery class I'd been putting off for 2 years and made friends with a woman named June who was 73 and ruthlessly funny and brought homemade cookies every Thursday. I started going to a therapist, something I had also put off for years, telling myself I didn't need it, that I was managing fine. I was not managing fine. I just wasn't allowing myself to know it. My therapist, in our third session, asked me to describe what I thought a family was supposed to do. I talked for a long time. Then she asked me to describe what my family actually did. There was a long pause. "They're not the same list," I said. "No," she said, "they're not." "How long have you been trying to make them match?" I thought about it. Since I was a kid, probably. Since I was old enough to understand that something was a little off and young enough to believe it could be fixed if I was just easier, less needy, more convenient, more cheerful, better at not needing things at all. "A long time," I said. "And how's that been working?" she asked. I laughed. Actually laughed. "Not great," I said. About 6 weeks after my surgery, I was at Rosie's apartment for dinner when she mentioned, almost in passing, that her cousin was visiting that weekend. She'd mentioned her cousin before a woman named Dana who had grown up nearby and moved away to Seattle years ago. "She goes through her family stuff too," Rosie said. "She'd probably love to meet you." We all had dinner together the following Saturday. Dana was 34, a nurse practitioner, sharp and warm and full of opinions about things I had no opinions about, which I found refreshing. At one point she said something that stuck with me. She said, "I used to think loyalty meant staying close no matter what, but now I think real loyalty is being honest about what's actually there." I didn't say anything in the moment, but I thought about it all the way home. There is a version of this story where I end by telling you that my family came around, that the conversation with my mother opened a door, that Daniel called eventually with an apology, that Paige showed up at my apartment one day with a card and a long hug and we cried together and started over. Some families do that. Some families have the hard conversation and then actually change. I can't tell you that happened, because it didn't. What did happen was smaller. My mother started asking about my health when she called nothing deep, just, "How are you feeling? How is the recovery going?" Questions she hadn't thought to ask before. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. A small adjustment, a slight turning. My father sent me an email. He was not someone who sent emails. It was short 7 sentences, and it said that he was sorry he hadn't picked up when I called from the hospital, and that he was proud of me for handling things the way I had, and that he loved me. He signed it with his full name, which made me laugh and cry at the same time. I printed it and put it on my refrigerator. That felt like enough. From him. It felt real. Here is what I know now that I didn't know before all of this. The people who show up for you in your hardest moments are not always the people you expected. They are sometimes a rideshare driver named Gerald with a pine tree air freshener who asks if you have someone at home. They are sometimes a friend who arrives in 20 minutes with a mango smoothie and a heating pad and doesn't make it into a performance of kindness, just does it, quietly, because that's who she is. They are sometimes a 73-year-old woman in a pottery class who brings cookies and makes you laugh for the first time in weeks. And the people who don't show up, you are allowed to let that mean something. You are allowed to factor it in. You are allowed to stop organizing your heart around the hope that they will be different next time, if the evidence of your actual life is telling you otherwise. This is not bitterness. At least I don't think it is. I still love my family. In the complicated, tenacious way you love people who are part of the architecture of who you are, even when they've let you down. I am not trying to burn anything down. I am just trying to be honest about what's actually there. And for the first time in a long time, I think I finally am. If you are watching this and you are someone who has been through something like this, who has reached out and been told to try Uber, who has been discharged alone, who has felt like the most inconvenient version of yourself in the eyes of people who are supposed to love you, I want you to know something. The problem is not that you needed too much. The problem is that they gave too little. You are allowed to name that. You are allowed to grieve it. And you are allowed to build, slowly and deliberately, a life full of people who show up, who turn the radio down without being asked, who arrive in 20 minutes, who ask how you're feeling and actually wait for the answer. That life is available to you. I promise you it is. I'm still building mine.